Right, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for this session's on managing successful programs, or MSP. My name is Jean-Paul. I'm head of client services for Spoke. With me today is Peter Johnson. He is our lead MSP trainer. So in the webinar today, we're going to explore the whole MSP framework, which is obviously a globally recognized standard for managing complex programs and delivering transformational change. Now, whether you're new to program management or you're just looking to deepen your expertise, this session will basically provide you valuable insights into how MSP can help align projects with strategic objectives, as well as effectively manage risk and deliver measurable benefits. Okay, what can you expect over the next hour or so? So we're going to go through a general overview of MSP. We'll also look at real-world applications of MSP and generally the benefits of holding the certification itself. Towards the end, we will have a Q&A session. However, during the session, if any questions come to mind, feel free to post it into the chat and we'll get to that question and answer it as best we can, as soon as we can. Without further ado, here is Peter. You're on mute, Peter.
I turned it off deliberately. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter Johnson, or PJ, and I've been involved in the Prince 2 family for 30 plus years, and I've been dealing with MSP and program management for about 20 of those. I've been a program manager for NATO because I was in the Navy, and there was a program for command and control in Norfolk, Virginia. And I've also been involved in programs in a variety of roles when I was in the private sector, because mergers and acquisitions are classic sort of programs, as we'll see a little bit later. But also, when I was a civil servant in the Office of Government Commerce, I was effectively the sponsor for Prince 2 and MSP and the other methods, because it used to be owned by the government in the UK, but now it belongs to PeopleCert because it was sold off. The crown jewels was sold off by the government. Anyway, without further ado, there is a manual like there is for all of the methods, and it deals with all the main features of MSP. So we have the overview, the key concepts. We have the principles or the must-haves or the critical success factors, and a number of theory chapters or themes, which is number 4, 5, 6, right the way through to decisions number 10 on the screen. And to bring it all together, we have a process model, and you can see the processes themselves are introduced in chapter 11, and then we go through each one in turn, 12, 13, all the way through to 18. So it's quite nicely structured. Now, what I like to do to set the scene for where MSP fits into the overall landscape, this is a personal overview that I've developed over the years. And VUCA stands for the environment in which we live. We've got a highly volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous environment. Wars, global warming, you name it, there's all sorts of things there. And the people who are producing the business plans for your organization, they generally have the drivers for change, which could be political, economic, societal, technical, legal or environmental. There are more, but that's the usual sort of handle we have there. And your host organization produced something like a 5 to 10 year rolling plan from all those drivers for change. And the problem is you can't do absolutely everything that you really want to do. So the change objectives in the business plans, they are given to probably a subset of the management board, and they are managing the totality of change, which we call the portfolio. And they have to make investment decisions to prioritize the standalone projects and the more strategic programs, which contain lots of projects and other work. And one of the features of projects is that they focus on delivering the outputs at the bottom in green. They focus on delivering the projects on time, within budget, to the required quality. That's the sort of standard thing that we all talk about. And the sad reality is that very often the real thing that when we get improvements in the business is sort of half left to chance. In a program which consists of multiple projects and other work that might not necessarily be project oriented, the program doesn't close until the benefits are self-sustaining. So the program includes, as well as the projects and other work delivering the outputs, it includes line management, preparing people for change, the hearts and minds. It includes transitioning all the outputs into service. And when you transitioned the outputs into service, you have new ways of working or outcomes. And as a result of doing things differently, you will have benefits being realized, and those benefits should link to the organization's change objectives. And what we have is we have a broad team. It's not just for program managers, this course, it's for everybody in the broad team. So one of the great and the good from what I've drawn as purple here, one of the great and good is actually the senior responsible owner, as it's called, but basically it's the program sponsor. And the program sponsor is very good at making decisions and liaising with the great and the good, but actually needs other people to get things done. So the senior responsible owner needs a program manager to oversee the projects and the other work. So as well as managing the program manager is often a project board member. And that's all very well and good because the program manager manages the project programs on a day-to-day basis. But we actually need somebody to look after all this very important area in BAU on a day-to-day basis. So complementing the program manager, there's a role called a business change manager to do all this preparation, transition and outcomes and then the benefits. Now, very important, the program manager will obviously be assisted by project managers. They're not on the program board, but they're essential for delivering the outputs. And the business change manager needs change agents in the areas of the business that are going to be affected. So we've got a big team. The core of the program board is the SRO, program manager and business change manager, but we need project managers and we need change agents. Usually, and recommended, highly recommended, programs need a program office, and the program office lead will also be a member of the program board. Now, MSP deals with programs. MSP ties in with Prince 2, which we can use to manage the projects, and MSP ties in with MOP, which stands for Management of Portfolios, and it also ties in with P3O, which stands for Portfolio, Program and Project Offices. On the right-hand side, we've got one coming up shortly, a presentation on change management. We've got change management, that is the methods that we use to actually effect all this really necessary area for real success, because real success is actually doing things differently and getting the measurable improvements in business performance. So that's the overall change landscape in which we sit. Now, many of the problems with programs is generated because somebody senior says we're going to do this, which is not a good idea. A good idea for an effective leader in a major transformational change that JP mentioned earlier is to get key stakeholders together in what's called a visioning workshop and say to people, now this is where we are at the moment, and get them to agree that some things are good and some things are not so good. And the leader, the program sponsor, will say, what would happen if we didn't do anything? And usually what it means is we go from state beginning to state the end, and there's no turning back. It's a one-way street, it's a valve or a burning bridge or burning platform. So if we don't do anything, there'll be dire consequences. But rather than say we're going to do this on the blue line, the SRO will invite the other key stakeholders to say, what do we want to achieve? And normally it's quite relatively easy to get stakeholders to agree what we need to achieve. And that helps drive something in MSP that we call the vision statement. And early on, it will only be a draft vision statement. And linking to the processes, it's done in identify the program. What is it we want to achieve? So having agreed what we want to achieve, the next thing to do is to move into design the outcomes, the next process, and say, well, if we've got to achieve those things at a high level, what are the detailed benefits that we need to achieve? And then we say, what do we need to describe those? We need to specify them, and we call them benefit profiles, because we're going to promise delivery of those benefits. And I call that heads, because it's like a 50p piece. We need to achieve something. Now, what do we need to do to sustain those achievements through new ways of working? And MSP calls the new ways of working the target operating model. And the target operating model, the difference between the current operating model and the final target operating model, gives us the scope of the program. Now, the scope of the program, there'll be some things that will be new that we didn't have before. There'll be some things that we need to retain, as we've always had. There'll be some things we need to improve or enhance, and there might be other things that we need to remove. So, for example, when I was dealing with the merger of two major IT services and consultancy companies, there was a lot of stuff that needed to be new. There were good bits from both organisations that need to be retained but merged. Some things need to be enhanced, but other things like headquarters buildings, we didn't need two sets of headquarters, only need one. And so there are other things that needed to be removed. So the first thing to do is to work out what you want to achieve, and then you need to work out what you need to sustain those achievements. And MSP is brilliant because it helps us define the scope of the program. Next, we move into the process called the plan for the journey, and we have tranches. And these tranches are often done roughly annually to coincide with the financial planning in the organisation. And so we had a current operating model. We're going to have a final target operating model, in this case, 3 years later. But in between times, we'll have an intermediate operating model followed by another intermediate operating model. So we've got a working model step by step by step, or what MSP calls tranche by tranche by tranche. Now, so what do we mean by the scope? I mentioned some things are new, some things are retained, some enhanced, some removed. So I was working with the operations director on the new business processes for the merged organisation. I was working with others as a change agent to describe the new behaviours and culture that was needed by the consultants in the merged organisation. And we had some new terms and conditions and things like that, was to make the working there attractive. We had a new wiring diagram. Two organisations don't just automatically fit together. And a new wiring diagram, new capability and capacity, new role descriptions, and you name it. We had new IT systems to support the new operating systems. We didn't need some infrastructure. We didn't need two headquarters, but we might need some more infrastructure. So that's part of the scope of the program. And we need to make sure that we learn lessons, not just log lessons learned. So we need a culture of learning in an organization, and having a central PMO helps coordinate those learnings with a knowledge management officer. And we need all the management, financial and operational information for the new business. So this gives us the scope. Now, projects traditionally are pretty good at technology and infrastructure, but projects aren't terribly good at business processes, changes of culture, etc., which is why it's useful to do that on the right-hand side of that diagram I did as line management, preparing people for change. And what we tend to do is not trying to go for a big bang, but do it chunk by chunk by chunk. So we plan the tranches in outline to get the general idea of what the scope of the program is going to be. We don't yet plan the projects in detail. We wait until we know what the destinations are on the journey, and then we can work out how to allocate the work. So the next slide is to look at the overall process model. So we had the change objectives at the portfolio level that came from the business plans, and the mandate comes to the senior responsible owner or program sponsor, and we move in to identify the program. And you might recall that gave us the achievements that we need to have at the end of the program. Then we design the outcomes for what I call the destination. We need much more detail on the content of the scope of the program, the new processes, culture, etc. And that gives us the target operating model, which gave us, you remember, the scope of the program. Then we can plan the tranches one by one, often at an annual sort of basis, with intermediate operating models. And in MSP, we're talking about landing points or a safe place to stop, because you might not get as far as the end of the journey, but you should have a working model at the end of each annual tranche, if they were annual. So all these diamonds here are go, no-go decisions by the investment decision makers. They decide if the achievements are satisfactory, you move into design the outcomes. They agree if the detailed destination is satisfactory, and then you move to plan progressive delivery. Then, if they approve that, then we go into the detailed planning of the projects and the other work. So all the detailed planning is done in deliver the capabilities. And this is the main bailiwick of the program manager, overseeing the projects and the other work. So, but whilst the program manager is focusing on the project work, the business change manager is doing the hearts and minds for pre-transition, the awareness, all those sorts of things, preparing people so they're ready, willing, and able to adopt the capabilities that are delivered by the projects. So once the outputs are delivered in a tranche, MSP recommends generally that they are batched together, rather like a software release. So they are batched together and they're released as a whole to the user communities, and they go into the next process called embed the outcomes, where we go from the old ways of working to the new ways of working. This is often quite a traumatic period. The plans for going from the old ways of working to the new ways of working will be overseen by the business change manager, who needs to oversee transition to make sure that all the affected areas in the operations will be adopting the new ways of working. And at the end of adopting the new ways of working, we have a safe place to stop. We don't tend to declare victory too early. What we need to do is make sure it's fully embedded before we move on, because we don't want people to revert to type. And then there's a big decision is made in evaluate new information. The program office lead will say, this is how much we spent on the current tranche, and this is how overall the progress was in the projects and the other work. The business change manager will say, this is what's actually happening on the ground compared with what was designed to happen in the intermediate operating model, because there might be some gaps. And the program manager, along with the sponsor, will look at the volatile, uncertain, complex environment and the new business plans, for example, to see if anything's changed. Funding arrangements might have changed, priorities might have changed. So a big decision is then made on the basis of those three inputs. Do we close the program, or do we go back and plan the next tranche, one by one? But at some point, we will have done something, a satisfactory amount of work, and we'll close the program. And then we need to make sure that BAU operations will maximize the outputs and get the most value as possible. So we need to ensure that we have a party to close the program, but we also need to know that the ongoing benefits will remain tagged to the program, and they will be self-sustaining, they don't revert to type. So one of the advantages over projects is that the control of everything that goes on in BAU to deal with the change is part of the program. It is not remote like it often is in a project sort of world. So we've simplified the process model in this diagram here. So it's nice and simple. The only snag is you have to go round and round the buoy until you've done enough tranches. Now, one of the really good features about MSP is it's benefit focused. We have been given a challenge by the business to give our contribution to the strategic objectives in the business plans, which you can see on the right-hand side. So we get our share of the strategic objectives. That was in the mandate. Then in identify the program and refined in design the outcomes, then we work out what the vision statement is, the high level achievements, and the detail of the achievements. So we've got the destination heads, as I called it. There are implied benefits in the vision statement, and we got it from the visioning workshop. Then what we try and do is we work out what the benefits are, and we need to sign up to those benefits. And that's also in the early part of the life cycle in design the outcomes. But this is quite complex, because if you think of the health service, a faster diagnosis of something, which is a measurable improvement in business performance, might mean to a reduction in costs of ongoing treatment. So there's an awful lot of technicalities involved in producing the benefits and the linkages between the benefits, the dependencies between them. But that's all done upfront as part of the overall planning of before we do the detail. So we know what benefits we need. Then we've got to work out what the benefit profiles are and sign up to them. Then we need to say, if that's heads, what we want to achieve and the detail of what we want to achieve, what is tails going to be? We need to do some things differently. So there'll be outcomes, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. So the future operating model will say, these are different areas of the business, and there'll be new, enhanced, removed, or whatever the other one was, outcomes, processes, culture, organization, technology, infrastructure, information and data, and knowledge and learning. So then we know what the tails needs to be. We need to do things differently. And the difference between as is and doing things differently gave us the scope of the program in the earlier slides. So we know that we've got to deliver new capabilities to the business from projects and other work. And at the same time, the business needs to be prepared for change, business change manager. So the capabilities is defined as the aggregate of the outputs from the projects and the other work. And we need to do that preparation for change through the business change manager, a senior change agent on the program board, and their equivalent of project managers, which are the change agents in the business. So then we can say, from these projects, we're giving these outputs, and these outputs from the other work will give us those capabilities that will help us achieve the outcomes, and then the benefits, and then the vision statement and links to the business. And I call this the benefit, well, MSP calls it the benefits map, but I call it the storyboard, because you can use it to tell people in the projects how they're going to contribute to change later on. You can use it to inform people working in the business that if they do these things differently, it will result in measurable improvements, which will link to a more effective business. So the benefits map gives us the scope of the program all the way through, and it's really very effective. So you can say, from these projects and other work and some prep, you'll be able to do things differently as designed in the target operating model, and then deliver the benefits. And some of them will be non-financial and some will be financial. And we will show that we are fulfilling the vision for the program, which contributes to the strategic or corporate objectives. So the benefits map is a really powerful communications tool to be used by the leaders in the program, the business change manager, the SRO, the program manager. So MSP, the authors in this series of methods, Prince 2 et al., they seem to be assessed with circles, which is a bit annoying because you've got to move your head around to work out what they are. But what we have in MSP, we call the 3 lenses for MSP to bring them together. And the outer ring, if you like, the tire, is the 7 must-haves or principles, which is dealt with in the chapter 2. And we'll go through those shortly a little bit. And then you've got the 7 theory chapters, organisation, design, justification, etc. And then we've got the overall process model. So their view of the process model is like that. What we had was a process model like that, which just make a little bit more sense than just the labels. But it's the same process model in essence. So MSP theoretically has got these 3 lenses that we need to go into. So having done that, let's have a look at the first area. Oh, by the way, not a good idea to think of them as a wheel. Think of them as bearings because they all flow around independently. There's no direct link between organisation and bring pace and value. There's no direct link between planned progressive delivery and organisation. So think of them as bearings all rotating around completely independently. So what we need, we don't just need program management, we need program leadership. We need inspirational leadership, hence the role of the SRO and the role of the program manager inspiring project managers and the role of the BCM inspiring the change agents. So we must lead with purpose, inspirational sorts of leadership. Now, many programs involve multiple investing organizations. Multiple investing organizations means that the decision makers need to collaborate across organizational boundaries. So I add in the phrase organizational boundaries to emphasize it's the decision makers at the management sort of level working together on the decision making bodies. So the next thing is that we know, because of the environment in which we sit, that there's an awful lot more risk associated with programs than just projects, and there's more risk in projects than BAU. So we need to deal with risk and ambiguity as things change over quite long, protracted timescales. This next principle, it really ought to be called align with changing priorities. The business plans will change year on year at least, and possibly even more frequently than that. So we need to be comfortable with reacting to changes of different priorities in the business. Program managers and business change managers relish change, whereas often project managers don't like change. So you try and keep their targets nice and well defined. If we collaborate across organizational boundaries at the higher level, we also need to deploy diverse skills, the worker bees. We need to bring people together from across each individual investing organization, the different silos of those organizations, and supplement them by people that we hire in from outside. So some people will be supplemented, other things might be outsourced to a third party. So we need to deploy those diverse skills as effectively and efficiently as possible, because different skills cost different amounts of resources. And we need to upskill our own resources. So deploy diverse skills is a very crucial principle. And projects tend to focus on delivering the outputs on time to specification or quality within budget. Programs are always focusing on the outcomes and the benefits. And this doesn't mean do things fast. It means do things at a pace that people can cope with. And I introduced that earlier by showing the idea of tranches, year by year by year often. So do things at a pace that people can cope with. Don't introduce change at the end of the financial year. In the public sector, for example, don't do it in February, March. In retail, don't introduce change in the peak seasons for buying, like Christmas we're just about to move into. So all those are principles that we must take heed of all of the time. So there are conveniently, there are 7 principles or musts or critical success factors. You need evidence for those if you want to be successful. So now we've got 7 different topics. So we need to go into detail about the role of the management board, the investment board, the program board, project boards, all those sort of things, and the individual key members, the 4 key roles of the SRO, the program manager, the business change manager, and the program office lead. So we need to go into the detail of organisation, which also includes dealing with stakeholders as well. We need to go into more detail on designing the destination. So that's really, a lot of that is about the target operating model and the change from as is to the future. Justification is linked to the business case. Well, a good idea is to have a business case for the whole program, but also a business case for each tranche, because you might stop at a safe place to stop at the end of a tranche. So we go into that in rather more detail, but basically keep it simple, stupid. Think of a seesaw, benefits on one side, costs on the other, moderated by risks, but massive changes over time as well. So there's quite a lot needs to go into the justification world. Whoops, structure, we'll see shortly. I've got a slide coming up, I think, about structure, about the major plans for the program manager and the business change manager. The program manager is going to be focused on the projects and the other work, but incorporating all the work of transition. And the BCM is going to be dealing with all aspects of pre-transition, transition, and then post-transition. As I mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that we don't lock up knowledge in people's brains. It's available to people. So we've got an awful lot to deal with on making sure that we capture explicit learning rather than tacit learning that's held in somebody's head. So we need good knowledge management so we can learn from experiences to improve as we go through our program, and also other programs can learn from us and we can learn from others. Many of you will have come across the concept of peer reviews or gateway reviews or audits. And what we need to make sure in a program is we've got, for example, project assurance at the project level in Prince 2, project assurance. We can also have an independent check commissioned by the program manager on one or more projects. But overall, the commissioning layer, the business will need to do things like an audit or a gateway review or a peer review of the whole program. So we have assurance at 3 levels in MSP. And I showed you the diamonds for decisions. We have major decisions for go or no-go decisions. And we also have decisions about how to respond to risks and issues as we go through the program. So we've got a whole chapter on dealing with that. So we've got 7 theory chapters. So one by one, let's look at the organization. So specifically, it needs to make sure that we get that inspired leadership. And we make sure that the right people make decisions at the right level. So we need to define the appropriate roles and responsibilities. But as I said before, the chapter is also about engaging with stakeholders. So these people, the sponsoring group in MSP, they call the portfolio level the sponsoring group, and they are the investment decision makers. The SRO is one of the great and the good who has been detailed off to lead the program and take ultimate accountability for the program, aided and abetted by, at the very least, the program manager overseeing projects, the business change manager overseeing change in BAU, and the program office lead, leading what I call the nerve center and information hub for the program. So we've got a whole theory chapter on organization. We have to deal with topics one by one, and then we can implement it at the end of the course. We can draw it all together into a coherent whole. So the next chapter is about design, and that was very closely linked to the destination in terms of the new operating model. And the key documents are what's going to be achieved, the vision statement, heads, and the detail of the vision, the benefit profiles or benefit specifications, if you like. And we've got the beginnings of a benefits map. And we have an idea of the target and intermediate operating models. And the 7 aspects of those is things that are new, enhanced, removed, or I think I said all those. Anyway, processes, culture, organization, technology. That's just an overview of the things we need there. So, and we really need to put a lot of effort into getting the requirements correct, just like in a project, but it's much broader than that. There's going to be, normally in transformational change, you're bound to have new, these don't stand and alone, by the way, they all interlink with each other, but there'll be new processes or enhanced processes. And you might need to have new behaviors for people to multitask, for example. And you might need people to occupy different roles with different responsibilities in the new organization. Now, not for the project, but the new wiring diagram for the organization to run the new business as usual, tranche by tranche by tranche. There'll be new IT systems, for example, and there'll be perhaps new or removed buildings or improved buildings. And we need to make sure we've got all the management, financial and operational information to run the new business. And we've got an effective way of sharing knowledge. So effectively what we're doing is we're rewriting the operations manual for the organization, anticipating it the years ahead, which is quite a big challenge. So we put an awful lot of effort into designing the destination. Then there's a whole chapter on what's called structure, which I say is the main plans. So what we need to do is the program manager, with all the stakeholder involvement, needs to plan the delivery of projects tranche by tranche by tranche, and any other work that doesn't have to be done as a project, but can be done as BAU, and do it at a pace of delivery that people can cope with, and then move from one state to the next state. And overall, you'll achieve benefits tranche by tranche by tranche as well. So there are 2 key documents: the program manager's delivery plan and the business change manager's benefits realization plan, which is in effect better described as transition plans, all aspects of transition: pre-transition, transition, and post-transition. And I think we need a diagram to explain these 2 from different perspectives. So, perspective number 1. What we've got here is overlapping tranches. Sometimes you can have a tranche that overlaps, and it's shown here. So tranche 1, by definition, consists of Project Alpha, Bravo, and other work. And they deliver their capability as a release in the standard mode to the user community. And then it's over to the business change managers to deal with transition. At the end of transition, you should have the new ways of working, the outcomes. But we don't declare victory too early. We make sure that it's fully embedded before we reach a safe place to stop, landing point, at the end of tranche 1. Even though Project Charlie is occurring in the same time frame as Alpha, Bravo, and the other work, it's not in tranche 1, it's in tranche 2 because it doesn't deliver until later. So to a degree, this is being conducted at risk in case a safe place to stop you stopped at. But you want to keep things moving, so that's a risk that you might be able to accept. Now, by definition, this is a diagram from the MSP manual. Project Charlie and Project Delta is one work stream that's going into some discrete areas of the business. You release the outputs from Charlie and Delta as a capability, and the business change manager has to transition them into service. And when they're transitioned, you've got the outcomes. Stop there for a moment. Another work stream has got Project Echo and Project Foxtrot, and they deliver the capability to different parts of the business, and they're both transitioning to service by their change teams. We don't declare victory too early. We make sure that both work streams' work is fully embedded before we declare a safe place to stop, the landing point 2, which is then the end of tranche 2. So this is very much focused on a very high level overview from the program manager's perspective. Now, experience tells us in program management that there are two things done really, really badly, more likely than not, in many organizations. The first thing is many organizations don't have a business change management function that works properly. So a lot is left to chance in BAU. And the other thing is that they don't adequately have a full scope of the program. They tend to focus on the outputs of projects and not the totality of the operating model, processes, organization, culture, etc. Let me try and explain that by looking at the same area from a different perspective, now from the perspective of the business change manager. The business change manager's view. This time we haven't got overlapping tranches, we've got one tranche butts onto another tranche. But the BCM, pre-transition, transition, and post-transition. Actually, post-transition goes on forever. It does there, it does there. So what we've got in tranche one, we've just got one work stream. And what's the role of the BCM in pre-transition? As well as measuring the baseline benefits for the achievements as is, what we also need to do is to make sure that we prepare people for change. So we're going to take those capabilities and then we're going to transition them into service and then get the new operating model. So the BCM has to plan transition with the change agents, needs to get them implemented into the operational areas, whilst not having a too far of a dip in the performance of BAU while this transformational change is going on. Has to make sure, as I said before, that people are prepared for change, and then the changes are embedded and sustained in post-transition. So this stuff here isn't really the bailiwick of the program manager. This needs to be part of BAU, hence the role of the business change manager to ensure that all that lot is done. Then in the second tranche, we've got two parallel work streams, but essentially the same things happen. And this is the major failing of many programs, is that they don't adequately deal with pre-transition, transition, and post-transition. It's very much a partnership of the BAU operational world and the project sort of change type world, delivering the outputs that enable change. So you've got the two views there, the program manager's point of view and the business change manager's point of view. So the justification chapter, the SRO agenda is value for money. The SRO effectively owns the business case. And the problem you've got is overall, what you'd like to do, you possibly might not be able to afford. So you've got to get the best bangs per buck, if you like. And overall, the program has to manage the finances over the whole life cycle. So it deals with budgeting and cash flow management, more partnership with budget managers, for example, here. But overall, the major business case document is the representation of the justification, and it compares the benefits with the costs and the appropriate timings, and it deals with the risks as well. So that's no small challenge in a program that could last for multiple years, maybe 5 years or more, 2 years or more, depending on the size of the program. And then because we got tranche by tranche by tranche, when we're evaluating new information at the end of each tranche, then we need to make sure that we review the business case and revalidate the business case. We've emphasized here revalidating because the manual just says validating, but the text is revalidating a business case. So what we need to do is to make sure the program is still aligned with the business plans. We need to know if we've still got the money, and we know from bitter experience that sometimes money evaporates. And from the point of view of the business change manager and the change agents, are the outcomes and the benefits still achievable, or were they pipe dreams in the first instance? And does it give you an optimal balance between benefits and costs? And do we have a risk budget essentially? Have we got a fallback plan or whatever? So those are the questions you need to ask year after year after year, because nothing stays constant. So knowledge and information. The chapter's called knowledge, but it really is about knowledge and information, knowledge management. It's also about information security. We need to acquire, curate, and use knowledge appropriately. We need to learn lessons, not just log them, and get people to realise it's not just a tick box exercise, it's part of the means of improving the overall business. And you need to make sure that only the right people have got access to information at the right time, all those sorts of things. So we need to cope with data privacy and things like that. So InfoSec comes very much into knowledge and information chapter. So knowledge management is about learning, so associate knowledge with learning, and information management is about control of what they call the program artifacts, but the program documentation. So for example, if at the end of a tranche, someone recommends adding in an extra project, that extra project is going to add costs into the business case. That extra project is going to change the operating model because it's going to deliver some more outputs. And because you're delivering more outputs, you might get more benefits. So the business case is going to change. So any change in the program artifacts is going to have a knock-on effect on all the other ones. So that's a major headache for the program manager and the nerve center and information hub. But what you need to make sure is that you're storing things in an effective way. You've got robust configuration management and change control, not just of documents, but of drawings and other features of projects. And you need to make sure that the rogue eyes can't hack into your information base. And you also need to archive information at the end so it doesn't get lost if it's needed for audit purposes. So we've got a whole chapter on information and knowledge alongside each other. The chapter that many people have difficulty with, because it's not written very well, is the assurance chapter. Many of you will be Prince 2 practitioners, and you will know that in Prince 2, the project board either does its own assurance on a day-to-day basis, or it delegates it to someone in their line management, and we call that project assurance. And they will be checking and advising on the project manager. They'll be making sure that the project manager's reports are accurate reflection of reality rather than the figments of the project manager's imagination. That's at the first line of defence, as it's called. At the second line of defence, there'll be multiple projects in the programme and multiple areas of the business preparing for change. So at this level, the programme manager could commission a review of one or more projects that might have gone into exception, for example, and the business change manager could commission a review of operational readiness for change in some areas of the new operational world. And the one that many people will be familiar with will be the portfolio level, which is, in government terms, gateway reviews, or it will be peer reviews or audits in the commercial sort of world. And a gateway review was commissioned by the sponsoring group and the SRO, and they want overall confidence in the totality of the programme, not just a finite element of the programme. So we have an assurance chapter that deals with the different lines of defence and the nature of the assurance events. Then the last of the themes is the decisions theme. And so it says it describes how programs make decisions at various points, process by process by process, tranche by tranche, go or no-go decisions. But decisions are also made usually by the program board and the SRO about the best way to deal with issues as they arise and risks as they arise. So overall decisions could be major go and no-go decisions, or a considered decision about how to respond to a risk or an issue. So we've got a whole chapter on that. And in particular, one of the things that MSP focuses on is options analysis. So what you don't want is to have a preconceived idea of what the solution is. A decision maker, as I always say to people, they make decisions based on evidence and risk. It's up to the program manager to provide the evidence analysis of the risks before a decision is made. So we need to make sure we've got all the information that we need to make that decision. That's where the nerve center and information hub comes in. And rather than just say, I recommend you do this, what the project program manager should do is say, we could do this, we could do that, or do the other, or do nothing. And these are the pros and cons of each of the options, and then make a recommendation based on the analysis of what option to take forward. And that means that we do things in a much more considered way rather than just jump to conclusions. And the manual says we should understand do nothing differently from at least two other viable options. And a viable option means it has to be viable, not just a Rolls-Royce decision versus a Mickey Mouse decision versus the one you've actually chosen. So we need to make sure we've got that culture of effective decision making through viable options. Then we run into the process model. So we started with an overview of the process model, and now let's look at each of the processes one by one. So you need to know the drivers for the program, the business plans and PESTLE, those sort of things. Make sure that your program is a strategic fit with the business plans. And you need to describe in the terms of justification, is this likely to be a worthwhile investment? Does it give more value for money? And you do that before you do the detailed work. So agree what needs to be achieved before you do the next level of defining the detail of the scope of the program. So identify the program results in the vision statement for the program, its overall high level achievements. Design the outcomes mentioned was the destination. The solid foundations for the program gives us the scope of the program. So we've got heads, the vision statement and the detailed benefit profiles. We've got the target operating model, and the gap between as is and the destination gives us the scope of the program, and the risks associated with achieving the heads and tails on the destination. And we need to keep reviewing the business case in detail, minimally at the end of each tranche, because things change in the overall environment. So design the outcomes is effectively design the destination. Then we plan progressive delivery. This doesn't mean plan the detail, it means basically should be called plan the tranches. Plan what you're going to do in year 1, year 2, year 3, if you're doing your tranches on an annual basis. So we know what the destination is. Now we need to work out how we're going to get there. And the rule is we structure the projects and the other work into discrete tranches of delivery, which will then yield, after the end of the tranche, will yield the benefits. And we need to make sure that we've got the justification before we go into the detailed planning. So as before, the decision makers make considered decisions, evidence-based and risk-based, and the evidence is going to be the documentation that we need, including the business case. So now, if it's agreed that we can implement those plans, then we really start spending money, because we now have to plan, execute plans, and deliver the outputs for the projects and the other work. And the program manager and the program board will be overseeing all of the work. And overall, you need to deliver the outputs that will enable you to say, I've reached the intermediate operating model or the final operating model. So this is very much the bailiwick of the program manager, but at the same time, the business change manager is preparing the business for change. Once the outputs have been aggregated together and delivered as a capability to the BCM and the change agents, they can be transitioned into service in BAU, in operations. and they call this process embed the outcomes. And overall, the BCM and the change agents have to ensure that the user communities adopt the new ways of working and subsequently realize the benefits. So the process incorporates the management of transition from the old ways of working to new ways of working. Some people call that adoption in other sorts of circumstances. So overall, you can't afford to dip too far in performance. You can't just stop a hospital or stop business for 2 months while this changes. You've got to keep BAU going on as well. At the end of the tranche, after you've reached the safe place to stop, then a decision needs to be made of whether you continue to the next tranche or close the program. So the sponsoring group, the great and the good at the higher level, and the program board need to be supported by high quality, up-to-date and decision-ready information before deciding to close the program or continue. And I'll reprise that information shortly. And then if you do decide to close the program, we need to do it in a controlled way, making sure that all the benefits are still tagged to your program, and make sure that you can get as much value out of the program as possible. And what you don't want to do is to lose the benefits over time. So overall, we have the process model that we started with. This is our version of it. The business has change objectives. They give the mandate to the program sponsor or the SRO, and the SRO leads these workshops to agree what the achievements of the program need to be, and that will give us the vision statement for the program. In design the outcomes, we refine the vision statement and have benefit profiles, gives us heads for the destination, and then the target operating model gives us the scope of the program and its tails to sustain those benefits. This is how the business needs to be in the future. And then we plan progressive delivery in tranches with intermediate operating models or safe places to stop. And between each of the processes, decisions are made by the investment decision makers, including the SRO. If it's agreed to implement those tranches, then we go into the detailed planning of the projects and the other work. And at the same time as the program manager overseeing the projects and the other work, the BCM and the change agents are planning for transition in pre-transition. And once the outputs are delivered as a release to the user community, then the BCM and the change agents will be working with those outputs and to transition them into service in a process called embed the outcomes, therefore moving from old ways of working to new ways of working. When you've got the change fully embedded and you've got the operating model working satisfactorily, we have a safe place to stop, which MSP calls the landing point. And after the landing point, we move into the process, evaluate new information. And this big decision diamond is, do we close the program now, or do we go back and plan the next tranche? And what we need to do is get 3 perspectives coming through. The program office lead will have the nuts and bolts of performance of the projects and the other work, timings, costs, things like that. The BCM will say, we designed the intermediate operating model. This is what's actually happening on the ground. There might be some differences. So on the basis of the business change manager's analysis of how successful it's been in operations, that's one perspective. And the BCM is complemented always by the program manager, who will need to work with the SRO to work out what's changed in the business plans and the overall drivers for change. And when you've got those 3 inputs to the end of tranche report, then a decision can be made, close the program or move to the next tranche. And when you do close the program, you want to maximize the value for the program, keep the benefits tagged to that program, and disband the overall program organization. But make sure the benefits are self-sustaining. But overall, benefits during the program are in the scope of the program, unlike projects where they tend to be left until afterwards. So that's a very fast run through. I say it's just under an hour. That's what I thought we're aiming for. My time management isn't too bad, JP. So last but not least, how is it assessed from my point of view? So there are two levels of exam, just like Prince 2. There's a foundation exam, which is a memory test. It's about the fundamentals and definitions and purposes of the various documents and things as part of the MSP world. So it takes an hour, it's closed book, there are 60 questions, and all you've got to do is get 60% to pass the exam. I prefer a target of 70%, better chance of passing the next level if you've got 70%. But whereas this is a memory test, the practitioner is an application test. A lot of critical reasoning comes into that particular exam. Although it's still a multiple choice exam, it's a much more challenging multiple choice exam than the foundation exam. And frankly, it's much more fun because it's more like BAU of the way people behave at this level in the change agenda. So the exam is now 2.5 hours long, and there are 70 questions. So there's roughly twice as much time for each question in the practitioner as the foundation. And the pass mark is still 60% or 42 to pass. So I'm sure there's been lots of questions in there. I haven't been following it because I've been thinking and trying to keep on time. So now, JP.
Thanks, PJ. That was a very comprehensive overview of MSP, which is great. I have some technical questions myself, which I'm sure others may ask as well. Before we go on to the Q&A, what I'd like to do is tell you a bit more about Spoke and the offers if you are looking to actually have this training. Ultimately, Spoke's been around for 30 years. Our expertise is in project and program management. We were pioneers in the UK for delivering the first ever Prince 2 course, the first ever MSP course, and the first ever Agile PM course. Okay, we operate globally. And in terms of training, we do have comprehensive learning solutions available. If you are an organization and you are inquiring on behalf of an organization, we can provide private in-house training, and that can be done face-to-face or virtual. For those that are individual that wish to be trained, you can attend a live virtual instructor-led session. Depending on whether you want to do foundation only or practitioner, there are several options. We do offer self-paced options, which may be convenient if you are trying to upskill your current skill set around working in working practices. And that includes much more interactive e-learning. We have an experience. I mean, all our trainers have quite a seasoned experience. PJ probably wouldn't have mentioned too much about his background, but it is very, very broad. So he has got experience in several different sectors along with our other MSP trainers as well. So you are in very, very good hands. The focus with Spoke is always on the immersive learning experience. So we tend to have smaller groups of training, but it is more intensive and it tends to bring out your existing skill sets and how best it can be applied to the MSP methodology. Now, after the session, you can get in contact with us. I think Sue's put our email address directly in the chat. There is also a QR code there as well. You will get recordings of this session. So if you do forget anything or any questions, you can message us after the session to have that answered. Alternatively as well, you can get in touch to have a consultation call if you do have or if you are inquiring on behalf of a group, and we'll be happy to answer any questions or any questions in relation to the syllabus. You will also get an MSP glossary as well as Projects with ChatGPT ebook. Obviously, AI is extremely prominent within project management, and it will continue to be that way. And the ebook will assist you in understanding how it applies in everyday project management. Absolutely vital tool to have. Okay. Now, in terms of offers, there is 40% off all our public courses. And that is with our full course packages, both foundation and practitioner, or one or the other. You can add exam safety resit products onto the package. Again, it's all a matter of preference, but it does give you, if you're not so good at exams, it is a good product to add on specifically for MSP, as it is notoriously a slightly more difficult exam than something like Prince 2, for example. Okay. In terms of client discounts, they are several. And again, depending upon the group size, there is also a 40% discount off of delegate costs as well. PJ, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to say the pass rate in the foundation exam is very high because it's a memory test and it's just basic vocabulary. But sadly, the pass rate at the practitioner exam is probably about 75%, just because it's an acquired taste and it is a bit more challenging. So certainly the safety net for the practitioner is well worth considering.
Totally. The foundation pass mark with ourselves sits at about 96%. So it all depends upon your prior experience, and if you're unsure of whether you've got the acquired skills already to do this course, then that's what we're here for. I see there's a message from Chris on there saying, do you have any Black Friday offers that we should look out for? Funny you say that. We do. What I would advise is, if you drop us an email with obviously live attendance of this session, you will get in addition of the 40%. So there's some very good deals to get at this point in time. Notoriously, it is a very good time of year to be purchasing these types of courses. So we tend to get organizations bulk buying for their staff in readiness for the next financial year. Okay. So ebook, Richard Cameron mentions the ebook. I believe Suzanne will probably send it to you after the session along with the recordings. But ultimately, does anyone have any questions? We'll now move into the Q&A side of it, and we'll spend some time on here if anyone's got any thoughts on the methodology or any kind of unanswered questions at this point. I believe PJ's overview was extremely comprehensive on this particular syllabus point. But yeah, we'll open the floor to any questions. Anything from you, PJ, at this point, just to mention?
No, I'm just relieved I kept the time.
Of course. I'll ask the first question, actually.
Yeah.
Are there any prerequisites or prior qualifications that you believe that delegates should have before taking the MSP training specifically? For example, like Prince 2.
Okay, Prince 2 is one route in, but it doesn't necessarily follow that you're going to be a good program manager or a good SRO or business change manager if you're a Prince 2 practitioner. You can be a very effective person in program management if you've been an accountant. You can be a very efficient business change manager if you are a senior person in operations. So I wouldn't say that for everybody, Prince 2 is a necessary precursor to MSP. For some people, it's an avenue in because they're in that sort of agenda. But it's not. A program manager isn't a grown-up project manager. A program manager is a project sponsor, which is a different thing entirely. And also, as I said before in my spiel, it's not just for the manager of the program. It's for anybody in a project manager role, a change agent role, as well as the BCM and the SRO. So the precursor, I think, generally is you've got applicable management experience for MSP. It's not something that you would do. If you graduate, you do your Prince 2 course in year 1 or year 2 postgraduate, and then you immediately do MSP. You probably need some management experience before you move into MSP.
That answers the
Although
question.
I could say, on the other hand, if you've got an MBA, then program management is probably going to be more effective than Prince 2.
Just to mention, guys, if you've got any questions, you probably won't be able to activate your microphone. So please do post the question in the chat and we'll have a look at it. I believe Steve had his hand up, but if you wouldn't mind, Steve, if you post the question in the chat. Louise, I'm curious what organisations in the UK have fully adopted the MSP methodology and apply it effectively. Who holds the gold standard?
The first real key people who really engaged with it in the public sector was the health service, because they tried to manage transformational change as a Prince 2 series of projects. And it didn't work because they were just focused on delivering bits and pieces, not on the coherent whole. But there are lots of people, and of course they won't give you a white paper on everything, but there are white papers at Axelos. There are lots of people who recognise that MSP is a really good tool set. There isn't much competition really. The APM's treatise on program management adds no value. The Americans PMI, they seem to be focusing on big projects rather than the totality of change, as we've illustrated with the target operating model. So the National Health Service, but of course the National Health Service isn't one entity. It's 1.5 million people working in thousands of semi-autonomous business units. But increasingly they're starting to work together quite effectively, and MSP is one tool set that they need. So, and you'll find that so I mentioned in the organization that I was in, when they're doing mergers and acquisitions, MSP is a perfect tool for joining two companies together with disparate cultures, different organizations, different business processes, and all the rest of it to end up with one coherent whole. So
okay, next question's from Emmanuel. You spoke about the bad practice of not having an appropriate business change management function. In this unfortunate circumstance, how can we navigate the business change manager and program manager being the same person, the same way change agents can be also project managers?
Yeah, well, it's not good practice to try and do everything. You can't be a Jack or Jill of all trades. The program manager's got a big task overseeing all the project work, dealing with the nitty-gritty of the engine room of delivering the outputs. The business change is going to be deployed in front lines and in arm's length bodies, and the scope of what the business change manager does, in what I said on this particular slide, it's very difficult to embody that in one person. It just doesn't work. And all the experience is, if you try and do one person, you're effectively just managing a project. It's not really a proper program. You end up automatically de-scoping the whole thing, which is just, it's really sad, but that's what a lot of organizations try and do, and it just doesn't work. If you ask the auditors, if your auditors go in, if you do a peer review, they will say it just doesn't work. And I've been a peer reviewer. I used to, I did gateway reviews of high-risk projects when I was a civil servant, and I was the methods person, and it just doesn't work. Oh, I'll give you one example. This is a good one, this. When I was a civil servant, I was sent out to help the Abu Dhabi equivalent of the Cabinet Office with program management. And they tried to impose change on government in their major program they didn't consult with all the different other departments like transport and health and whatever. They just told people, this is the way you're going to do business in the future. And the head politician disbanded the organization because it wasn't effective. So it just didn't work. So they disbanded the organization. Everybody lost their jobs. So that's just an example. But I couldn't get across to them that they had to liaise with other organizations to have these change agents as well as the business change manager. They just had somebody saying, this is the way you've got to do it. And they said, we don't want to behave like that. We've got our own ways of doing things. You never asked us.
Let's move on to, so Steve's now kindly posted the question in the chat. Says, thanks, Peter. I completed the certification in January this year through Spoke, and it is good to get a refresh, especially with your lens on it. Question, in your experience, is the BCM a professional change manager or a delegated business manager?
Ideally, it's the latter, but they need change management skills. So what I would do, for example, if you're bringing in a professional change manager, I'd say that's more like a consultant. The BCM, in the philosophy of MSP, needs to be a highly respected operational person that the operators believe in. If you bring in a guru, then it's not the same as somebody who's going to be there all the way through the program, dealing with all the benefit side and the transition sort of side. So I would say it's primarily the latter with some support from the former.
Okay, thanks, PJ. I actually have a question for you as well. This tends to be a common reoccurrence question for MSP overviews is, can MSP be integrated with other frameworks such as Agile or Prince2?
Of course it can.
Yeah.
Although I said there is at the top, there's management of portfolios and then MSP and then Prince2 and alongside it P3O. The mode of delivery for your projects could be a combination of agile projects and linear projects, and other work can just be other work. So it will integrate with anything at the bottom layer. It just has to be overseen by the program manager and or the business change manager. Yeah, you're not mandated to use Prince2 alongside MSP.
Okay. Let's see. No question was really okay. So, John Smiley, no question was really useful overview. Thank you. Put a bit of life behind the text. Excellent. So, does anyone else have any other questions? Yes, it looks like there is another one. One more question from Louise, if I may. I was interested in learning about MSP to understand the context of projects within enterprise businesses I work with, but you've got me thinking about how this approach could scale to suit smaller businesses. Is there any formal guidance around scaling MSP in the same way as you can scale Prince2?
Is there any form? The whole thing is scalable, because with all changes, what you tend to have is a triage. There are simple programs, medium-sized programs, and the crown jewel sorts of programs, and you shrink the whole guidance to fit. So you can deal with it. It's guidance. It's not crack the handle and out pop the sausages. It's just general good guidance. So usually people can take some aspects of things from it, and you end up, in effect, you've got your virtual maturity model. There are things that you're good at and the things that you're less good at, and you need to focus. You can't get to be perfect in one big bang. You need to sort of work out how you're going to get there by degrees, or if you like, tranche by tranche. So it is scalable from simple programs to major programs. It doesn't have to be a multi-million Crossrail or something like that. It can be relatively small for any business. So even if it's a small startup business, it can be relevant. Or two small businesses joining together. Again, you've got this idea of we need one way of doing things, one reward system, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it precludes. There's no reason why you can't use MSP for any change initiative.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, MSP is part of the same exam board PeopleCert, so it is part of a suite of methods as well, isn't it? So it does link in. It is scalable, which hopefully PJ's answered your question, Louise, I believe.
Another
yes.
feature, JP, is that if those people who've got Prince2 or Prince2 Agile or P3O, the exams are all in the same sort of style. So once you've done one PeopleCert exam, you know the sort of expectations for the technology and the structure of the exam. So you've got a sort of a head start.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any other questions to add? Do you have anything else to add, PJ? Any
No,
questions
I've
that
got
are
nothing else to
commonly
add.
asked? No, I think we've covered quite a broad. Oh, here we go. Another question from Chris. As a BA wanting to learn project management, which one's the best to take? Or very vast question there.
Well, it depends on the context, really.
Yeah.
And a business analyst is going to be really useful for business processes. So in thinking of the target operating model, it's going to be really quite useful for that. But a BA is going to be quite useful in a project sense as well. So the question is the BA likely to be involved with tactical change or strategic change? That's my, if it's the latter, strategic, then MSP. If it's the former, then Prince 2.
Another reminder, guys, we do have overviews for other methodologies as well. We do have a Prince 2 one coming up and a change management. Change management is, again, very, very popular. Based on pretty much every organization has some element of change management involved. So if you do want to join any of the other sessions, you can click on to the original page on our website where you can sign up. But we will follow a similar format to what we've done with PJ today. And if you've got any other questions or any additional queries, do give us a call or drop us a message or pop the question in there, and then we'll come back to you as well.
One last thing, by the way, I deal with MSP because I like it. I love it. I'm not dealing with it because I have to do it. I'm semi-retired, and Spoke give me big chunks of work to do, and I'm very happy because it's for me, it's just a real pleasure. So I don't find it onerous at all. And I hope my enthusiasm spills over to the candidates as well.
Good. There's some very interesting concept discussed, but it sounds like quite a few of you are unsure of what path to take. And ultimately, that's what I'm here for, is to help you make that correct choice based on circumstances, based on the role that you want to do or that you are in at the moment and you want to improve generally. But I think that's pretty much everything from us. Like I said, any questions, please do drop us an email. Like I said, for those that are attending the live session, there are additional discounted benefits above and beyond the standard Black Friday deal of 40%. Okay, so please do get in touch ASAP to register that interest, and please do register on to our other overviews. I will be on those overviews as well, in a similar capacity to this, but feel free to ask any questions relating to any methodology. Thanks, everyone.
A countdown clock. How many are in? There's still a few left. There's still 8.
Yeah, we'll wait for all of them to leave if there's any kind of last minute questions. This is kind of sometimes people wait until everyone's gone.
Well, there's
Got 4 left.
Does that include us?
No, that's excluding us.
That's excluding us.
Very good session, PJ, as always.
Well, I haven't done a webinar before.
Yeah, and you know, it is at this point, there's a lot of questions, a lot of unsurety with what people want to do. Some of them may have already been, program managers, but just want to get a bit of a taster of the formal qualification as such, because their organization may require it as well. I know there was NHS people on there. That is a very popular, MSP is extremely popular for them. But yeah, very good. I've learned something from it. Whilst I've done a Prince 2, I haven't done MSP. So
you're very welcome to tag on.
Yeah, no, I know. It's very interesting. Hence the reason I had questions of my own task. Right. I will let you go, PJ. Thanks again for completing the overview for us. But other than that, see you very soon.
Well, let Paul know I was okay.
Of course.
He's still not communicating terribly well. Right, well, I love you and leave you. Okay.
Cheers, PJ. Bye-bye.
Cheers, bye.